The main sharing that I want to do today is about word problems, right? As you know probably from your own children, this is usually the kind of question that is the most challenging, right? So especially those questions that are quite lengthy, there's a lot of information given in the problem, so it's not so easy for a lot of students to be able to quickly analyze what's the problem about and then how to get to the solutions. Okay, so the main focus will be on how to analyze lengthy word problems, how to look at the important parts of the problem in a very fundamental way of looking at the problem. And then from there, we will see how we can use a very systematic way of interpreting the statements and eventually guide ourselves to the solution. All right. So let's jump straight to the first word problem. Okay, let me just quickly read through. So a bun cost 1/3 as much as a pie. Tom spent 5/11 of his money on 20 pies and 3/4 of his remaining money on some buns. He had $14.40 left in the end. Part A, find the amount of money Tom had at first. Part B, find the number of buns Tom bought. Okay, so while the number of words is not that many, right, you can probably feel that this problem has quite a number of pieces of information. So how can we quickly break it down so that we know what to focus on? Right, if you notice, there's actually two different groups of statements. Okay, now the first group in pink, right, talks about each individual item, right? Meaning we have to deal with the number of items itself. Whether is it about the price of each of them or the number of items, right? Also in part B, we are asked to find the number of buns. So all these statements or phrases in pink deals with the need to count the number of things. But the statements that are highlighted in blue, okay, they deal with the portions of the money, meaning they are dealing with fractions of the whole or fraction of a certain part. Okay, so these are the two different kind of statements that every problem will have. So if you can quickly distinguish between these two groups of statements, then you can more easily go into how you can break up your analysis and then how you can break up your steps to the solutions. Right? So now that we have seen how we can group the kind of information given, then of course the next thing that we should think about will be which ones should we start with? Right? We know that there are two sides of the story, but which one should we start with? Okay, I'll pause here for a while. If you have any ideas to share, please let us know in the chat. Okay, which group of statements should we start with? What kind of clues or information should we depend on to know what we should start with? Right, because this is critical. Because we shouldn't be always just trying to remember certain structure for certain question. We have to learn to have very general guidelines that will always work for all the problems. Okay. So thank you everyone who has responded. Right, we have suggestion for fractions, the nice comparisons, okay, the units, and so on. Right, the clue here for me would be, because this question deals with part A and B, right? So we look at part A. Okay, part A says, please find the amount of money first. Therefore, we should look at the group of blue highlighted statements. Right, so do learn that for word problems that have part A and B, usually that is the intention, right? it serves to give you the hint, because the problem may be long. So part A says, I'm hinting you to look at this certain part of the story. So please start with that. Alright. So we'll start with looking at the statements highlighted in blue right now. Okay, so these statements again deals with the fraction of the money, right? Nothing to do with the individual items. Okay, so I'm going to put it into this table where we just keep track of the different portion of the story, right? So we have the portion spent on pies, the portion spent on buns, and the portion that's left. Then of course, when we add all these portions together, it will give us the total amount of money that Tom had at first. And that's exactly what we want to find in part A. Okay? So once we get this sorted out, we can then look at those statements and fill in the information. Okay? So let's look at the first fraction, which is 5/11 of his money on pies. Right? Take note, right now we know we don't have to bother with the number of pies yet. Right? We just want to know this portion of money is spent on pies. Alright? So when we read a fraction, we must always be clear with the denominator first. So can you tell me, by typing in the text, what does 11 represent? Is it the pies, the buns, the left, or the total? Alright, thank you everybody. Right, yes, everybody is correct. It's the total, because it's 5/11 of his money, right? So the denominator is always the idea or the item that follows the word of. So his money means the total, and therefore 5 refers to the amount spent on the pies. So this is what we can write under the headings pie. We have 5 parts, and then the total will be 11 parts. Okay, then can we write something in between this 5 and 11? If you know what we should write, just key in the number. It's a 1-digit number. So yes, right, we should write 6 to represent the amount spent on the buns and the amount that's left. Okay, so every fractions can always give us 3 numbers, right? 2 from the numerator and the denominator, and the third one is the difference between them. So it is good for us to also understand what is that third number. What does it mean? Okay, so in this case, it means these 2 portions of the money. Okay, so now we're done with this part. We can move on to the next statement. Now, 3/4 of his remaining money on buns. So now for this fraction, what does the 4 represent? Just type in one word in the text if you know what the denominator 4 represent. Alright, so the denominator 4 is the remaining money, right? Because the word remaining comes immediately after the word of. So that means that this word represents the denominator. Okay, and the remaining money is the buns and the left. Okay, so that means now we can see that in the same rectangle that we have written 6 previously, this is also where we have to write this new number 4, right? So that means that this 4 units in red is representing the same quantity as the 6 parts in blue. Okay, both of them represent the remaining, made up of the buns and the left. Why is that so? Because the word remaining comes after the first piece of information, which is only dealing with the pies. So the remaining must be the rest of the total. Okay, and of course the numerator will be 3 is for the buns. Okay, so we put under buns 3. Okay, so what's the next number that we can write? Remember just now I mentioned that every fraction we should have 3 numbers. We have 4, we have 3. That means we have 1. So what does 1 represent? It's great that many of you are responding very actively, right? Especially if you are a student, right? This will help you to understand this problem much better and also learn much better from this session. Alright, so of course, as you can see here, this is like a model drawing like that, right? This is 4 units, this is 3 units, of course this must be the 1 unit. We still have one piece of information that deals with the portions of the money, right, which is the $14.40, and that's what's left in the end. So we put it directly under the heading left. Okay, so we have made use of the 3 pieces of information given that involves the portions of the money. Now let's take a quick look again at part A, which is we want to find the amount of money Tom had at first, and that's exactly this box, right? Because this is where the total at first is. So it's good for us to also put a question mark there to remind ourselves that that's our objective for part A. So we need to find a way to find out what is the value of this box. So does anyone have any suggestion how we should proceed, right, in a few brief words, right, to find out the answer for part A? Or you can just share with us what is the next conclusion that you would like to write down. Right, thanks again for the response. Okay, so far, those who have responded, you're all correct. It's just which one you like to take. So some of you see that, okay, we can make the 6 parts and 4 units to become the same first, right? Because we can clearly see that both of them represent the same quantity. While some of you say that we can just conclude that this 1 part in red is equal to $14.40, right? Okay, so of course either way is fine. Okay, now in case some of you are still not too sure how we can come to such conclusion, or if you would like to know in general how should we have a kind of strategy where after we have present all the given information to find a way that we can be 90% sure that it will always work, so that later on you won't feel that you are stuck at a certain step, right? Is to start from our objective. Okay, so the advantage of presenting information in a table is this, right? In a table you can only either look up and down or left and right. Okay, so if your objective is here, then you can always check, well, if I want to link to the left, is there anything that can lead directly from this to my final answer? Okay, so in this case there isn't very direct comparison of this money to the final total, so perhaps this direction doesn't work. Then we'll look up and down, right? And there's only this 11 parts to talk about, which means that we should try to find what is 11 parts, because that's exactly what the total is. And to find 11 parts, now we know that we can look to the left, because this entire row there are 5 parts and 6 parts as well. So that's how we move on from our objective to the other parts of the table to form the strategy, to form the solution that you're seeking for. Okay, so now 11 parts, you look at 6 parts, right? You know that eventually, of course, you need to connect to this $14.40. It's just that you cannot connect it directly. So now we go one round. So why the 6 part work is because the 6 part connects to the 4 units, and the 4 units connects to the 1 unit, and 1 unit connect to the $14.40, right? So that's how we can see the path to our final solution. So if you can see that, of course, you definitely feel that you are very confident, and you can proceed on to write the rest of the steps. Okay, right? So this highlights shows exactly what I've just said. Okay, from here you look at the 11 parts. 11 parts, you look at the 6 parts. 6 parts, look at the 4 units. Look at the 1 units, and then you can connect, and so you can find the 4 units first. All right. So since 1 unit is 1440, to find 4 units, you just take that times 4, you get 5760. All right. Then you can find what is 1 part. Okay, because 6 parts is 5760. That means 1 part in blue. We just take 5760 divided by 6, so that will be $9.60. So now that you know what is the value for 1 part, you can of course solve the problem for part A. Right, part A simply just wants 11 parts. Since one part is 960, so we take 11 times 960, and that gives $105.60. Alright. So well done to those of you who have gotten these answers. Okay, what if we start with making this to become the same number of units? Okay. So that would mean that we should use the first common multiple of 6 and 4, right? So what would that be? Yes, thank you. That of course would be 12. Right, because 6 times 2 equals to 12. And 4 times 3 equals to 12. Okay. So that means that the pies, being the parts in blue, must also times 2. Okay, and we'll get that as 10. Okay, and the total will be times 2 as well, and that will be 22. And then for the buns in red, right, the red one times 3, so 3 times 3. That will be 9. And of course, this 1 unit here, right, it will be just 3. Right, because 1 times 3 is 3. Right, so in this case, we'll say that this 3 new units is 1440, and what we want to find is 22 units. Okay, so what we can do here is right, we just take 1440 divide by 3, that will give us the 1 unit, and then immediately multiply by 22, and if you check with your calculator, that will give you the same answer as well. Okay, so that's how we can do using the units. Which method is better for kids during exam? I would say it depends on your own child, right? Some students like to make the units the same, some would like to immediately use the actual value, right? Although as a general guide, I think most of us would feel more confident and comfortable when we can actually use the actual value to proceed with our steps. Okay, but really what is better, it depends on each person. Let's think about how we should proceed to the next part, part B. Remember, we still have these 3 pieces of information not used, so clearly they'll be used in part B. So what kind of setup can we use to analyze the rest of the problem? Right, here we're dealing with the number of things and also the price of each of them. Okay, so we'll use the number times each equals to total concept. Right, this is also usually known as the number times value concept, or quantity times value concept. Right, the number of things times the price of each thing in this case equals to the total amount of money. Okay, so we are counting the money spent on the pies and the money spent on the buns. Okay, so for this setup, it'll be good for us to write down the number of things first if possible. So the number of pies we are given, it is 20. Okay, the number of buns is exactly what we need to find in part B. So we put a question mark here again. Next, we go to the price of each of them, which is given in the first statement. Right, a bun costs 1/3 as much as a pie. So that means that the pi is the denominator, which is 3. So we put here another 3 new units, and the bun will be 1 unit. Of course, these units here is not the same as the previous ones. Okay, so that's why we have them in different colors and different brackets. Okay, so that's all we have to go with, and yet we need to find the number of buns. So what other information do we need to be able to finally solve the entire problem? Okay, I'll pause again for a while. If you have any suggestion, please key in the chat. Yes, of course we can name the price of the pi 3 units and the bun 1 unit, and then we can multiply. Okay, but even after we do that, there's a very important connection that we need to make. Because even if we get to these boxes with 60 units, okay, this one is unknown, right? Because this is a question mark. So in this case, that's not helpful over here. Right? We can do it over here. That's true. Alright? But if you get 60 units here, then how else should we proceed? Okay, that's the question. Right, so we can see that these two boxes are very important. Without the actual value for these two boxes, most likely we can't solve the problem, of course. Okay. As for the buns, we would also need the price for each of them. Okay. But that comes from the price for the pies. And that's where this comparison is. So let's go back to the total over here. Where else, or from where should we figure out the value for these two boxes? Right, so this is where a very systematic layout of your entire solution is important. Right, because you can see over here, right, remember this is where we deal with the amount of money spent on the pies and the buns. Okay, so for kids who have no labels and organization in the working for long problems, this might be where sometimes they will have to pause for a longer time because they become a bit unsure where to look for the necessary information. Right, so now we know we can simply come back to this table to look for the values over here. Right, we could have done that earlier, but because for part A we didn't need them, so we just left them alone. But now that we know we actually need them, right, we will go back and figure them out. Okay, so for the pies, it's very clear. 5 parts in blue is what we need to find, and we knew that 1 part is 960. Okay, so we just take 5 times 960. That will be the amount spent on the pies, which we can write over here as well, because these two boxes represent the same total amount for the pies. Okay, and let's find out for the buns as well. So for the buns, we'll be looking at the 3 units in red. Right, so we knew here 1 unit is 1440. Now we want 3 units, so we just take 3 times 1440, and that gives us 4320, which we'll then write over here. So now we can see this part here, we have more information, or the critical information that we need to be able to solve the problem. Okay, but before that, we still need to find the price of the pies. Right, so 20 pies costs $48. To find what is 1 pie, of course, we just take $48 to divide by 20, and that gives us $2.40. Alright, so by the time you reach this step, it'll be very obvious what are the last 2 steps. Next is to find the price of 1 bun, which is simply 1/3 of 240. So we take 240 divided by 3, that gives us 80 cents. And finally, we can answer the problem. The number of buns Tom bought, we take the total amount spent on the buns, divided by the price of each bun, we'll get the total number of buns bought, and that's 54. Okay, so that concludes the entire question. Okay, let's read through this next problem. Tina spent 5/9 of her money on 3 erasers and 8 rulers, and 3/4 of her remaining money on 7 pens. Each eraser cost 2/3 as much as each ruler. Each pen cost 40 cents more than each eraser. Part A. What fraction of her money did Tina spend? Part B. Find the cost of a ruler. So I hope you can see that, again, this problem is quite similar to the previous one. Okay. Of course, there's some differences, but by and large, the overall structure is the same. Okay. So again, the first thing is for you to be able to distinguish between the different types of information being given to you. Right, so let me show the highlight again. Right. So for the one in blue, okay, 5/9 of her money, 3/4 of her remaining money, and what fraction of money did she spend? All these are about the portions of the money again. Not so much about the individual items or the price of each item. Okay, so perhaps we should deal with them separately from the next group of information. Okay. So the next group, of course, is dealing with the number of items, right? The price of each type of the items, and eventually we need to find the cost of one ruler. Are you able to tell which one we should most likely begin with, right? Which side of story should we begin with? Do you observe the clue again, where we should start from? Very good. Everybody has learned very quickly from the previous problem. Right, because again, part A asks for what fraction of her money did she spend. So that's the clue. Right, so we should focus on the statements highlighted in blue first. So now we have the portion for the erasers, the portion for the rulers, the portion for the pens, and then we have the total. But I left something blank here. Why is that so? Why do we have a blank over here? Whereas earlier on, that problem doesn't have. So what can we write in this box? Right, this is also the box that sometimes students will miss it, right, which is why I wanted to highlight it here. Because when there's so many pieces of information, right, sometimes we may just miss certain not so obvious parts. Okay, remember, what we would like to show is that the parts or the portions should add up to give you the total. Okay, that's what we want to establish, because that's what these statements are about, right? They're about the different portions of the money, and they should add up to that total that is important. Okay, so if these are already representing the spending, then we cannot be writing spending over here, because then we'll be double counting when we add. Okay, so this part is where we write what's left, because she didn't spend all her money, right? It's not stated in this problem, unlike the earlier one. There's actually a statement that's talk about what's left. Okay, this one, it was not stated. You have to understand that when we say 3/4 of the remaining spent on the pens and then not buying anything else after that, that means that not all the money is spent. Okay, so therefore this is the money that's left. Right, so for this problem it is unwritten, so we have to identify that. First is 5/9 of her money on erasers and rulers. Again, I'm not highlighting the 3 and 8 because these numbers are not important. We just want to be clear that 5,9 is spent on this total for erasers and rulers. So once again, the denominator 9 represents her money, so that's the total here. So 5 will be for the combined expenditure for erasers and rulers. So that's over here. So we group these two boxes, make it a combined rectangle to show these 5 parts. Okay. So what number do we have over here? Thanks again. Everybody is correct, right? So 9 minus 5, the remaining is 4. Okay. And this 4 is a good thing in this problem. Why is that so? Because when we look at the next statement, 3/4 of the remaining money, right? This fraction, the denominator is 4, and this 4 represent the remaining money. And didn't we just conclude that this 4 here is also the remaining money? So that means that this 4 right now is the same as this 4, so they are a match. So they are the same kind of units. So unlike the previous problem where we may have to change the different units and parts, now we don't have to. Okay, simply the same kind of units. So we can write them in the same color and the same bracket. So 3 is for the pence, therefore what's left must be again 1. Right? So there we have it. Right, we have the total is 9 units, left is 1 unit, the pence 3 units, and then the combined erasers and rulers 5 units. They're all the same kind of units. Is it clear that we can answer part A already? Right, because part A simply just want the fraction of the money that she spent. Okay, so we can do this. The spending is for these 3 items, right? So 5 plus 3 equals to 8, so 8 out of the total, which is 9. So the answer for part A is 8 out of 9. Okay, you can of course also take the total of 9 minus what's left, which is 1, so that will give you 8 as well. I'm glad everybody is clear. Okay, so now we can move on to part B. Right, we still have a lot of information not used. So let's take a look again at what we have not used. Right, so we have the number of items. We have the price comparisons of each kind of items. And eventually we're supposed to find out the cost of one ruler. So again, this is about the number of things multiplying to the value of each thing to get to the total value. Right, so we have number multiplied to each equals to total. So for this part, obviously we do not need to talk about what's left and the total. It's just the items that we are buying. So that's all we write as the heading on top. So once again, we start with the number of things. Okay, in this case it is very clear cut, right? 3 erasers, 8 rulers, 7 pens. That's all. Then we go to the next statement, which is comparing the price of an eraser to the price of a ruler. Right, so the eraser is 2 units, the ruler will be 3 units. Okay, in this case, we'll write the letter U to represent units. Right, for multiplying in this way, right, it's better for us to write the letter U rather than writing in brackets, because quite likely later on we have to combine them with the actual value of money. So it's more proper for us to write in alphabets, right, in algebraic alphabets. So with these two, we can then go on to the next price comparison. Okay, thank you. Right, each pen costs 40 cents more than each eraser. So each eraser is 2 units. So a pen is 40 cents more. So we will write that as 2 units plus 0.40. Okay, I forgot to mention just now. Okay, in the headings in the front, okay, I have written them in dollars rather than in cents. So that's why here it will be 0.40. And the reason why I put the units on the outside is so that the rest of the table over here will look neater with less writing. After all, we understand that all this is about money, right? Good. So now with all these individual prices, we can then complete the table by carrying out the multiplication, right? Okay, so we do it for the erasers first. 3 times 2 units equals to 6 units. Then for the rulers, it will be 8 times 3 units equals to 24 units. Now pause here for you to tell me, for the pens, what should we write in the total? Right, what is the total after we multiply for the pens? Please key in the chat. Okay, well done everyone. I think at most 1 or 2 responses may have some error. Okay, but otherwise most of you has gotten it correct. Okay. Now when we multiply for the pens, 7 must multiply to the 2 units. 7 must also multiply to the 40 cents because we want 7 set of this, remember? Right, think of this as a box. You want such boxes 7 times. So everything in the box needs to multiply by 7. Okay. So we can do that separately, or you can just do that at one go by writing 7 times bracket 2 units plus 0.4 like some of you has written. So now we have the completed table for this part. We have gotten these few pieces of new information. So certainly we should be using them to proceed to our next stage. But how do we make use of these 3 boxes right now? We know that eventually we would like to find out what is the value for 1 unit. But how do we make use of these 6 units, 24 units, and 14 units plus 280? What kind of conclusion can we draw from these 3 boxes? Okay, if you know, please key in the chat. It's not uncommon that we may reach such a stage where, while we have a lot of information, we are not sure how we should proceed. Okay, so what kind of actions can we adopt? What kind of reminders can we create for ourselves that would prompt ourselves to look at the correct parts of whatever you have done so far, okay, to be able to continue? Okay, now if you stare hard for very long in this table and you couldn't get anywhere, then that means that most likely we need to go back to the first table. Because if you cannot draw any more conclusion from here, then where else can you go, right? You either go back to the problem or you go to the table that you have, because that's another part that is still available, and perhaps there's something underlying over there. Okay, so I think that's where the challenge for this problem is. Okay, the connection back to this is not very obvious. Right? But if you look at the headers, that's where the hints are. Okay? So that means we should connect this 6 units and the 24 units to the 5 parts over here. Okay? Because we have to make a comparison, right? In order for us to figure out the value for the units, if we don't make new comparisons, we will not be able to figure out how many units is what value. Right? So this is really the main focus of the primary school mathematics. It's for us to learn how to make comparisons. Okay, so the connection has to be drawn back to the first table. So now we can see that 5 parts is the same as this 30 units. Okay, so we write down 5 parts is 30 units. Then we can do something to the 3 parts over here, right? Because if 5 parts is 30 units, then how many units is 3 parts? Please key in the chat. Alright, that's right. 3 parts will be 18 units, right? Because 5 times 6 equals to 30, so here 3 times 6 equals to 18. Okay, we need to get to a new number of units so that we can really compare with this. Because what it means now here is that 18 units is exactly the same as 14 units plus 2.8. So let me write it out. Okay, this is the latest conclusion that we should draw after we make this comparison. And yes, some of you have already tapped out what is the next conclusion, right? Which is to tell how many units is this 2.8. Because finally, we can connect a number of units to this actual value, right? So we can ask this in this way, if you're not too clear, right? If we cover up this 2.8 here, then we'll be asking how many units plus 14 units will get you to 18 units. Then of course, 4 units is what you want, right? Therefore, it means that 4 units equals to $2.80. So once we get to this stage, we are almost done, right? Because we can then find out what is the value for 1 unit by taking 280 to divide by 4. So that gives 70 cents. And we can answer the question, right? Because we want to find the cost of the ruler. The ruler is simply just 3 units. And we found out 1 unit is 70 cents. So 3 times 70 cents gives us $2.10. Okay, so that's how we can solve this problem.